Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Cyber Hut and Silverfort. I'm just going to give it a minute or so to allow people to join and get settled, and then we will start the webinar shortly. Hi there, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, taking a look at Active Directory and all of the bad stuff which is and can happen to our Active Directory environment. My name is Simon Moffat. I'm founder and research analyst at the Cyber Hut, and with me is Rob Larson from Silverfort. Rob, hey, how are we doing?
Great, Simon. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No, I'm great. I'm doing very well. I'm getting into the Christmas spirit. We're also recording on December the 3rd, so we're heading into nearly into the festive period. But of course, the bad guys don't care about these things. They are constantly attacking our identity world. So we need to be having a constant eye on those bad actors. I guess before we dive into today's content, a couple of housekeeping things to start off with. Obviously, we are on Zoom today, so everybody is centrally muted. Of course, we do have the chat and the Q&A functionality available to us. So please add in your comments or questions as we go along, and we'll try and answer those in situ and in flight as we go along. But we'll have maybe 5 or 10 minutes at the end to wrap up any more questions which we don't cover throughout today's content. We are obviously recording this session as well, so you can watch on demand afterwards, send to your friends and colleagues, and of course we will send the recording to you afterwards as well. So today's topic is Active Directory, something that's been around for a long time, nearly 25 years. I think Windows 2000 Server was the first iteration of Active Directory to replace NT back in those days. And unfortunately, it's under huge attack. It's still a real bedrock of many organizations' key internal sort of internal management, but also even synchronizing to the cloud in there as well. I'm looking at a statistic yesterday, something 95% of the Fortune 1000 use or have used Active Directory, which is a huge number, and probably the same for the UK stock market as well, and many other large enterprises. So it's a real big dog of the sort of network operating system world, and it is a key adversarial target. And today's webinar really is to uncover some of those issues and obviously hopefully move towards being able to protect some of that infrastructure as well. So a couple of introductions. My name is Simon Moffat. I run an organization called the Cyber Hut, which is a leading boutique industry analyst firm tracking a whole host of identity security vendors, solutions, threat actors, and a whole host of the bad guys as well, releasing sort of research and market awareness to a whole host of different community members. And I guess going back to my career, when I started off back in 2000, 2001, I actually sat my Active Directory MCP, the Microsoft Certified Professional Exam. I was Googling this earlier, actually. I don't think that exists anymore. There was the MCP and then there's the Microsoft Certified Administrator exams. And they were important things 20 odd years ago. Clearly, the world has changed hugely in that time. And I've been fortunate to witness quite a lot of that change from an identity perspective. But I guess I'm joined by Rob from Silverfort. Rob, you've had a huge, vast career in various different areas, but a bit of space work there at Rockwell and a bit of sort of work in the consultancy world as well. So maybe hello to yourself again and maybe a quick introduction for your history.
Sure. It's great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about something like Active Directory and security. It's a big deal. as everybody is learning or has learned painfully. But I started my career a bit ago, Simon, as a special agent with the Treasury Department in a place called El Paso, Texas, kind of arresting criminals and throwing them in jail. And then I kind of felt like that maybe it wasn't my calling. So I pivoted out of sort of the guns and badges world and into more of the cyber world. And I got connected with NASA down in Houston, first doing DoD compliant security work for the classified shuttle flights, and then migrating into this information security game plan, which is really about, understanding your risks and threats and then aligning your budget with things that really mattered to prevent, detect, help you recover, respond from some of those pressing threats. And I came to Dell and spent about, I don't know, 14 years at Dell building up their security strategy, migrated to HP, doing a bunch of security strategy work as the director of architecture there, and came over to General Motors as their chief security architect. And halfway through my career there, I ended up inheriting the identity and access management strategy and partnered with a really great buddy of mine who owns the engineering of the identity world. And together we sort of started about a week and a half apart, sort of taking on that work. And then we got this really amazing audit report that really put identity square in the crosshairs. And that's kind of started that work of, okay, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? What are the problems here? What do we need to solve? And what is the priority? And now having finished my work at General Motors, I'm now a security advisor for Silverfort.
But this career, fuck, this variety of John. It's a bit of space, and we have a podcast, or at least an episode itself. That's the whole space world. It seems so exotic and so mysterious,
super cool.
almost super cool. Still to this day, it still fascinates, which is super. But I guess over the course of the career, there's some things which I guess haven't changed, which is the bad guys are still the bad guys. They want to get into key systems, and they never really, they don't think about compliance or audit or the issues around our HR involved. They don't care. They have this need and this want to attack systems, look at the easiest way in, systems that deliver the biggest reward. Obviously, you mentioned space there, or even commercial private sector. We have intellectual property. You have PII and PHI theft. We have competitive theft of data and things like this. So, the bad guys, they don't care. They want to get in. They want to find the easiest and most rewarding way into those environments. I think Active Directory, for all its benefits, it brings many sort of small, medium, and large enterprise productivity and other. Unfortunately, it's part of that attack aspect. So that's the main plan for today, is to dig into this. And a couple of slides to go through. I really want to sort of just set the foundation, really, as to Active Directory. We throw the term around a lot. It's like this plumbing that exists within organizations. It's this thing that's there. A lot of effort is often spent on the initial design. What's it going to do? The users, the systems, maybe integrating with mail services and sort of legacy exchange and databases and this stuff. But then I think what happens is a lot of people walk away. It's like the electrics in your house. You sort of walk away from it and leave it until something goes wrong. And I think that's when I want to touch on that a little bit, and obviously look at some of the basic controls which organizations look at, MFA being one. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. We need to get both standard users and PAM privileged users using MFA, but obviously then really spend the latter part talking about how we can improve our protection strategies for AD and trying to make it a productive world, but obviously more secure as well. So let's start for a little bit. I mean, it is vulnerable, and I think there's a couple of things I want to sort of pull out, really, maybe I guess from your sort of history as well there, that the Active Directory, it is seen as, it's like this thing, you get your Windows server, you install it, you press play, it's up and running. But again, you do walk away from this stuff. It's originally, and I guess speaking from my experience, when I sort of started a long time ago, I was I was sort of working in an infrastructure team. It was like the server team, if people remember that sort of stuff. Servers and platforms. It wasn't really security led. It was get this thing up and running. You're talking about availability, so making sure the hardware on the servers was available. So it was all quite infrastructure led. I guess I want to start there. Is that a fair assumption? Is that sort of stereotype still the real
Yeah,
deal? Do you
I
think?
think I do believe that some. To your point about criminals and bad actors, they're opportunistic and they came and they like to duplicate the attacks, right? Use the thing that works and use it until it doesn't work anymore. Then choose another attack, right? And I think when you map that sort of approach, which is opportunistic, which is kind of a quality of service strategy and maybe an identity um, sort of collection, like a bucket of identities. Like, hey, where are we going to put all these identities? Let's just put them in AD, right? So there was a quality of service
Yeah.
and I think a centralization approach that sort of reduced friction. Collected device IDs and NHIs and normal human user accounts, and let's just put them in AD. That's the best place to put them, and then we can kind of shrink our sort of account management strategy just to making sure Active Directory is up, it works, right? People can log in. It's a bad day when people can't log in. We know that. And if we have to do sort of systems management, instead of creating or remembering local accounts spread all over the environment, we kind of add these machines to the domain, and then we can apply kind of top level accounts, and then we can centrally do this effectively and efficiently and reduce costs, probably improve effectiveness. But there was never a conversation about, hey, what is the best security strategy for AD? And I would say I'm part of I was part of the problem in the early parts of my career because I really cared about the length of a password and the expiry length of, okay, 90 days, password has to be 8 characters, history of 10 before you could reuse the password. And that was probably how deep I went
Mm.
until, midway through my GM career when I really sort of, was educated by fire that there's a lot more to the conversation than what's the length of your password and when does it expire.
Yeah.
And I think, as AD and kind of the let's just log on attacks, continue to replicate through folks' environments, I think there's going to be more of a focus on, hey, AD is more than that. And it can do more, and we should do more with it for a lot of reasons: security, quality of service, effectiveness. So I think AD was sort of a set it and forget it world, and now it can no longer be just a set it and forget it.
Don't forget
You have to actually manage it day to day, not just quality of service and not just security, both together, you know, different halves of the same coin.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a really insightful point. I think, as you say, not necessarily the fault of the administration aspect, because if you go
Oh,
back, you talk about servers in general, it was about the server hardware itself. So you were talking about replacements, you're talking about keeping the hardware available, maybe looking at a bit of fault tolerance, disaster recovery, clustering and
sure.
stuff. And the security angle was often the physical, wasn't it? Things like data centers and physical access to server rooms and the like. And I think Active Directory, it was because it was, I think, sitting as a service within Microsoft. It wasn't like a separate or complex beast like NetWare from Novell or like a Linux angle. It was because it was like, oh, it's a service. You just start it. It sort of ended up being part of this server team, the server function, which was, as you say, it was looking at productivity, centralizing stuff, things like printing, getting
Yep.
getting
Yeah, good one.
getting identities off those sort of single point of failure NT servers, and that was always a good thing. So, okay, it's in AD now, so it's replicated
Yeah.
across domain controllers. That's enough, and I think that's really insightful. But I think a lot of that was, as you say, it was driven by standard IT functions, infrastructure, IT, get stuff running, very tactical almost. And again, that isn't a criticism, but it was sort of ticket led. Where's the next fire? And it would be printing, it'd be databases, patching, antivirus, rolling out things, and AD wasn't given the love, was it? I don't think.
No, but it was a good place to start. Like I think the notion of centralization and standardization and bringing devices and accounts together inside a common domain, whether it's workstations or servers, and sort of beginning to go, hey, let's bring this together so that we can maybe manage it more effectively. That was, I think, a really good start. I think where we've lagged both on the security side and with the identity side is that we haven't ramped as fast as we needed to protect the thing that we said was a really good idea to bring everybody together, right? Um, Devices and identities in the cloud, right? SaaS, it's more complicated, but the problem still remains the same, which is, hey, let's make sure that we are protecting, our really precious things like identities that access, applications and sensitive data really effectively. And I think when you see all the sort of the simple logon attacks where you just logging on, you get a single factor and the people log on and then they live off the land and find servers that are exposed and use them and laterally move. These are not esoteric attacks. They're relatively simple. Just because we haven't continued that advancement of securing, hey, we did really well last year. What's our next approach to 2026 and beyond? Where do we want to take this? What are our weaknesses? How are we mitigating those things to the best of our abilities? Those are kind of the conversations that I learned to have at GM that I never had before.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, yeah,
think they're really honest, great discussions to have cross-functionally, not only with the identity team, but with the security team and really important stakeholders within the business that are relying on the service to not only be secure, but work effectively and kind of drive a model that allows people to make good decisions, forecast budgeting, defend their budgeting decisions, their priority, and their sequencing. Um, it helps with a lot of conversations. It begins to smooth out the conversations as opposed to should we make Active Directory more secure, as opposed to what's our journey? What have
yeah,
we done in 2025 and what's our plan for 2026? And how are we dealing with some of the top 4 or 5 attack vectors that seem to be impacting lots of people? And
yeah,
what are we
yeah.
doing to be, off that naughty list as it relates to December? But right, we want to be on the nice
On the
list in
good
terms
list.
the good list in terms of Active Directory protection
Yeah.
and effectiveness.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think it's I think you're absolutely spot on in the sense of Active Directory. It's sort of moved, if you like, in when it was originally deployed. Absolutely right. The benefits of centralization and just getting something up and running and stable, that was great. But then obviously the importance of it, if you like, is increased. And by this, I mean it's integrating with more systems. You have obviously now we have things like Entra and with Microsoft Cloud, and we have other cloud services which your
Yeah.
AD on-prem may integrate with. So the sort of the impact of AD not working effectively now is much greater than perhaps it was 25 years ago, because there are more systems being integrated. But also, you mentioned stakeholders there. It isn't just sort of an IT operations thing. Now it's allowing it, and it's really transforming how the business operates, and that's really where this identity security stuff has really developed. And it's not just stopping the bad guys getting in, but if AD and all of your directories and all of your cloud directories and all of your, I guess, applications and services, if they are secure and running effective, it means the business can do more. It means they can move faster, they can share more information, they can access the data they need at the right times. It just allows the business to do more as well, which I think is often a bit overlooked. I think with security.
I think so too. I think the security teams and the identity teams should look at themselves as business enablers.
Yeah,
And then when you look at yourself differently, like, hey, I'm partnering with the business. We're going to go as fast as far as we can possibly go with the business while understanding our risk profile and our risk appetite. And we're kind of going to share that information as we go on the journey with the business. And we're going to KNOW. We're going to know how to make the business effective at what they're trying to achieve while ensuring that the identity game plan and I would say the rest of the security strategy work effectively, to enable that business to go where they want to go and do things that maybe nobody had thought of a month ago, but somebody has been thinking about it, and that's where they need to go next. And you want to be that strong partner that says, hey, let's go. We've got some ideas. It's going to be different. We have some really good ideas. Now, while we're understanding what your business strategy is, let's go. Let's go solve some problems, and more importantly, design some great solutions that enable you to go to the next spot with even less pain, and the next spot with even less pain. We put a lot of pressure on the security team and the identity team to deliver, really great solutions, not necessarily solving point problems. Those are important, but if you can get to that strategic conversation and push it, you become a partner with the business to make business happen. And I think that's kind of cool. And I didn't understand that at the beginning of my career. Like I didn't really get that. But as I was leaving HP and then joining GM, I began to realize that we were an enabler, and identity done well is also an enabler.
100%, yeah, and I guess brings us on to some of these sort of issues with AD. I think the bad guys realise this as well, and by that I mean they understand that they're not going to just target one small system in one small company. If they find a vulnerability in Active Directory, they know. Well, two things. One, because AD is so prolific, they're going to be able to potentially reuse that across multiple enterprises in different sectors, financial services, banking, insurance, healthcare. But also, if I don't know, say they pick an NTLM attack within an organization, it isn't just Simon's account in AD, for example. That may allow them get a foothold, then they can maybe lateral movement, then they can do privilege escalation. And suddenly, because identity is this huge enabler, suddenly it's like, oh, wow, actually, do you know what? All those other systems, which are now reliant on AD, cloud, on-prem, whatever, suddenly it's sort of gateway open. So I think in some respects, the top bad guys know this, and they've maybe helped build and develop the identity security, I guess, knowledge, if you like, because getting this stuff wrong, I think, has a huge impact.
It does. And Simon, the ubiquitous connectivity between companies and organizations to get business done, right? Tier 2 and tier 3 companies that may connect with larger companies that are a supplier or sub-supplier, they're using AD as well, right?
Yeah.
And so let's say these, the Fortune, 500 really have a relatively strong AD and identity management and security strategy. Let's just say that. Some of the tiered companies where maybe you have an IT director and he or she is actually responsible for not only quality of service for AD, but also security. But they are connected through a VPN or IPsec tunnel or some other mechanism or via the cloud. They're connected to tiered up companies, right?
Yeah.
And they're using the same product that an enterprise company is using, AD. And can they keep up with all the attack vectors and the methods and techniques for maybe improving the security strategy of their AD environment? They may not even have the talent and the time to do so, or it's small. So again, you find that crack, that crevice, and you really attack it until you are moving up, not only laterally, but you're moving up horizontally, up the stack towards a larger fish.
Yeah, exactly this. And it's you may well say you're as you said, a mid to large enterprise, 10,000 staff, whatever. And your AD, you maybe it is audited and it's controlled effectively, but obviously that broader supply chain aspect or even business partners, they may well suffer from pick one of these, a GPO issue or an RDP problem. It could be 2 or 3, I guess, levels away from your organization. But we've seen these supply chain attacks, very, very difficult for you to defend against because you don't have that visibility. But I think being aware and looking and saying, look, credential privilege escalation, lateral movement, that could occur at any part of our supply chain. And then at least ask the question, if you are looking at suppliers or business partners or other, part of that due diligence, part of those agreements, part of that sort of security handover aspect is to say, look, what is the situation here with
Yeah.
regards
What's
to
your
it?
plan?
Pass the question down. I think it's fair. I think it's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to do the audience sort of scare tactic here and say, look, there's loads of stuff can go wrong. Clearly, Active Directory is complicated and it is old. There's a lot of moving parts in there, and there are lots of things in AD which maybe we don't need in 2025, 2026. Things you can turn off, of course. But I guess what I'm trying to say on this slide, there's a lot of things that can happen. There's a lot of entry points. There's a lot of aspects around credential theft, both for an individual, lots of different users, lateral movement, and I guess standard users and service accounts as well, which is something to consider. But I guess the next thing I want to sort of bring up just briefly, there's a couple of attacks here, which are a couple of sort of campaigns, if you like, attack campaigns, which are pretty well understood. I think SolarWinds in the US, NotPetya Global, but NotPetya was impacted the NHS, actually, in the UK, and lots of other organizations. These are big, well-known attack groups. And it's funny, when I was sort of putting this together, 2020, 2017, it's quite a long time ago now, five. And the thing that dawned on me, this was sort of before the AI age. And I don't know whether we need to have like a calendar where we say sort of before AI and after AI. And I sort of look at these attacks thinking, these are really complicated attacks. And yes, whatever, SolarWinds and others, they may well have patched and solved these problems. But of course, other organizations may still be vulnerable to them. But they almost look benign and sort of manual in their sort of ways, because obviously AI is coming along. There's a recent report from Anthropic, which was articulating how the Claude platform is being used by the bad guys to automate, do recon, do exploit creation and delivery and such. It seems like like a hose pipe being turned on, where these sort of attacks, albeit they were hugely impactful, almost seem like a little trickle, really. So I don't know. What's your take? Are we definitely seeing a new era of AI-led attacks? Is that going to be different?
I think, SolarWinds specifically, that was a real targeted attack, right? That was a nation state coming after a company. And I think, in general, I would say it's very hard for any company, certainly, to stop a nation state. Like, that's tough. If the nation state puts you in their target, boy howdy, like that's rough, right?
Yeah.
But I think there'll be the people, the criminals that'll still do the same thing over and over, right? Why do we keep getting spam? Because it works. Like, if it didn't work, they would stop. Criminals would say, why would I keep doing the spam thing if it never works anymore? And yet it works. And so, the old school attacks, as you were mentioning, the before and after AI, right? They're still going to work for the people who want to operate that way from a criminal perspective. Other people may gravitate toward the AI world and leave some of these more crafted attacks behind, but it kind of depends on what they're coming after, right? And I think whatever the criminals are doing, they're going to make some choices too about how they want to attack. I think the kicker is for people that are defenders, right? The people that are operating Active Directory and trying to protect Active Directory, you have to worry about both. Like, you get no choice. It doesn't matter that SolarWinds attack, was a couple of years ago. You're going to have to protect against it. Why? Because someone may use it again, and you might be vulnerable. And then from the AI perspective onward, you're going to have to worry about that too, because there's just a new attack approach, right? It's becoming commoditized. And once you can commoditize it, you can sell it on the dark web, and somebody's going to build a platform, and you kind of pick your attack, targets and your method and techniques for doing that. You're going to pay more for things that are more close to 0-day than some of the older attack vectors, and you'll give them some cash, and off your platform will go. And so we're going to be worried about both, regardless of the world that we live in. It's both,
It is. It's again. It's no different, I suppose, to flu. We've had flu for decades and decades, and then you get COVID. It's like, oh well, I don't need to worry about flu. Well, actually, You do. You need to do. But I guess my worry with AI is, I think, twofold. They're absolutely right. We get a little bit fixated on these sort of big, complicated, oh, it's a nation state thing. And honestly, they are difficult, and you're not going to be able to defend against those. And you
Hard.
thought, oh, well, AI is it's just going to be used for really complicated things. And, I'm just a, whatever, 500 user organization. So, well, think it the other way. It's back to this hosepipe analogy where if you take the constructs of SolarWinds and the TTPs within there, and you sort of automate that even further with agentic AI and with an ability to proliferate. And if you are the bad guy, literally just identify the domain that you want to target.
Mm.
It's not just necessarily a brand new attack; it's an old attack, which is just the volume and the speed of sort of iteration there is frightening for me. I think it's definitely worrying time. And I guess I don't want to be whatever 20 or minutes, 30 minutes now. I don't want to sort of scare and say we've got all these problems, but we do need to be honest that AD is a target, and we need to start thinking how we can
Yeah.
protect ourselves. And authentication is, again, back to the old days in AD. You mentioned things like password policies and lockout and this sort of stuff. It was like the only sort of weapon and tool we had in those days. Pick a complex password, and people would write it down on their post-it note, or they would change it by one digit every month when they got the thing to reset and all this stuff. So we had some very, I guess, limited controls in those days. But obviously, since then, MFA is well understood, well documented. There's a whole host of different MFA components, even stuff built within sort of Microsoft Hello and stuff like this. But I guess first of all, MFA doesn't work for everybody. Not all users enroll. Not all users use it in the same way. You often have multiple different MFA functions being deployed in the same organization. Budget, usability, legacy, whatever. So there's often an issue there. But I've picked out a couple of issues here around MFA sometimes isn't enough. In a lot of these attacks, things like passing the hash, group policy misconfiguration problems, it's actually happening beyond authentication. Now, again, I'm not saying don't do MFA or don't improve MFA, but it's only table stakes. So it's only the starting point, isn't it? It's like washing your hands before. It's essential,
Yep.
but there's more to be done.
Yeah, I agree. I think I get to moderate some of the Identity Underground discussions that we have, and there are regions where MFA hasn't yet been readily adopted, right? And it may take them a couple more years to get a greater adoption ramp than maybe they have today. I
Mm.
think there are some basic things that probably, as you approach kind of, hey, let's get Active Directory more secure and our identities better understood. MFA is definitely in the mix, but I think there are protocols like RDP, WMI, SSH that are separate and apart from all of that also need to be addressed.
Mm.
Does everybody get to do that? Yes or no? If they
Mm.
do, should they provide another authentication experience? You can't get rid of NTLM v1 in some companies because the applications aren't ready for modern auth. Like, there are things that are inhibiting a lot of really great security controls from going into place. And I think, again, like any company, there are things you can pull off and get done to some defined number, 80% of something or 110% of something, whatever. But I think you're going to need to manage the risk of the leftovers, the exceptions, the carve outs, and what do they mean? And, do you secure them in place? Are there any mitigating controls that you can apply across the board? Um, those are challenging problems when the environment also hasn't been modified along with maybe the Active Directory needs to get more secure. So those are really challenges. And then I'll throw one more thing in, and that is secrets management, which was kind of a back office sort of, let's
Mhm.
not worry about it. Don't look here. Don't look behind this curtain. And then everybody's starting to look behind the curtain, going, "Oh crap! Like, I didn't know we did. I didn't know we did that. Like, I didn't know we shared tokens. I didn't know that that a non-human identity was being used by 5 different applications under 3 different CIOs, which was a real scenario. There's a lot of visibility yet to be achieved before identity teams and security teams can kind of tackle some of these problems because sometimes they're invisible to them. Like they cannot see it. It's
It,
it is unseeable with the tools that they have.
and do you think that it is an opportunity? I guess just sort of segueing a little bit. You mentioned things like secrets and NHI and NTLM, the legacy stuff. There, is it a case of sort of trying to educate the business to get them to upgrade and move away from these things, or do you have to sort of wait and just let them sort of die on their own, or is there a way of getting the business to change? Do you think?
Yeah, you know what we did? I was super proud of it. We built a cross-functional document of normal language called the North Star. It wasn't full of identity and security jargon and acronyms. It was, okay, here's what we want our identity platform to do. And that identity
Mm.
platform was a holistic architecture, IGA, secrets management, Active Directory, single source of truth, bridge between Linux and here, MFA, cloud instances, SaaS. Like we built kind of the picture that we know, and then kind of outlined sort of the game plan and where we were going to approach, maybe a red, yellow, green. What could we pull off? What needed to be budgeted next week or next year? And then we went to the business, and they were now part of the team, right? So
Mm.
now as a business team and a tech team working on solving problems, because what we also learned as part of this investigation is we were hurting the business. Like we were hurting
Mm.
them. Like they were working crazy forms and all sorts of crazy stuff just to get an identity created, or really more importantly, kind of the ACLs that identity needed. And you're like, man, we can do a better job together and build a game plan that is more secure, effective for quality of service, and meets the business needs.
I think it is. I think you're right. Correct language, meeting the business where they are. Talking about whatever ACE, access control entry group, abuse and stuff. It's going to be very specific audience, but I think you need to translate and show benefits
Yeah,
elsewhere.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that sort of segues, I guess, into the next part is how can we help the business? How can we make some, I guess, tactical things, but also a more strategic way of thinking about security and identity. And you sort of touched a lot of that sort of really at the beginning around and how it can enable the business to do more, share more, achieve what they want to try and achieve. I want to start with something a little bit tactical, I guess, which is similar to the Maslow hierarchy of needs, the hierarchy of security needs. These are quite well understood things in the sort of Microsoft Active Directory world, and it still sort of astonishes me. We get pulled into sort of workshops around architectural review and roadmap stuff, and it's like, okay, there's no point in trying to do that really cool, fancy stuff over there if you haven't done two things. One, reduce the number of accounts you have, and B, the number of permissions you have in AD or even the identity world. It's, oh yeah, it's fine. We'll get around to that stuff. I'm like, guys, they're two really big sort of low-hanging fruits, like two massive pineapples of fruit hanging, which if you solve, detecting stale users, detecting orphan accounts, brilliant. You sort of knock out 80% of your problem. And then looking at things like shadow administration, you may have your admins locked down and doing stuff. What about things like your DNS
Oh,
admin, DHCP admin, and a whole host of service accounts there, which, oh, it's okay. They only do certain things. But of course, the problem is cascaded and joined together, they can have huge impacts.
yeah,
Can we just do getting the basics right is the important.
it's super foundational. And I think I would even put a mirror of identity, business identity needs as a kind of a shadow Maslow, because it was very interesting to me to learn what the business was up to, versus what we thought they were doing. And more importantly, not only what they were doing, but what they needed, which was radically different
Yeah,
from what they were
yeah.
doing. And to the extent, and I talk about the business a lot because that's one of the things I really learned the last 5 or 6 years at GM was, look, this is not security for security's sake. This is security
Yeah.
so the business can go do some really cool stuff, right? And deliver and delight our customers, right? And so the question is, how can we do that wisely, effectively, and securely? And I think there's a way. And I think that the Maslow's hierarchy of security needs, in my view, is you do start with some of those basics. You can't build a house really well without a strong foundation. And that strong foundation is both people, process, and technology, right? There's some fundamentals that need to occur. And you ought to be able to scorecard them and track them and make sure that are we really doing what we said we were going to do as part of those foundational things? And,
Mm-hmm.
NHI, you mentioned NHI. Well, I learned painfully that it's an account nobody owns, and the password is known by everybody, like
Yeah.
because it works. And I mentioned finding, 5 or 6 apps with the same service account, and it was nobody knew it. Like if I'd turned off that account, or if I'd given that account to you, said, Simon, that's your application account. You're going to need to change it. If you had done that, 6 other apps would have broken, and no
Yeah.
one would have known it. Like nobody saw that that account was being used by a lot of different people. And what we learned was younger developers were moving from CIO to CIO as they were maturing in their career, and they would take those user IDs, the service and process accounts, plus the password with them because they knew it worked, and no one was stopping it.
Yeah.
And then you avoided all the filling out of the forms and defending why you needed this. You just used the same one because it works. Worked for the application last time, and now it'll work for this application coming up. So we found a whole bunch of like a whole cottage industry of both NHI management and overly privileged normal accounts that were able to reset passwords, create accounts. Like who knew that was a good idea? It wasn't a good idea. And that was just as we started digging into like, what do all these accounts do and who has them and why do they have these extra privileges? Because they're just normal people, just normal
Is
folks.
it is it an education thing? Is it process? It seems to me a bit of both, and probably a lack of tooling as well, I guess.
Yeah, I think visibility, like you have to be, it's hard to go account by account looking for this. So you really want the
Yeah.
visibility provided so you can make good decisions, maybe find out there may be some processes that are wonky in creating this situation. Fix those too, because that's what we found. A lot of processes had privilege into the domain, and you could just fill out a form and get anything you wanted. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's those things, there's process, and then there's the visibility and enforcement, right? So you can begin to see what's going on, stop it, find the root cause, fix that, educate people. Here's the new process. Follow
Mhm.
that. It's not hard. It's easy to do. And you begin to kind of pare away all the things that created kind of unforced errors. This wasn't bad people doing bad stuff. It was just normal folks doing their normal business. They had no idea that they had special privileges. They were just doing what they were asked to do, and they had the privilege to do it, and they did it.
And that's it. People are incentivized, aren't they, to do their job? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's misconfiguration or it's even accidental. It's not necessarily always malicious. But again, back
No.
to the bad guys. The bad guys will find those accidental workflows, shared accounts, excess permissions, accounts that aren't turned off. The NHI one's brilliant. One account or credential you're being used by multiple because it works, because it allows
It
them to
does.
do some stuff. And I think it's a bit of malicious there potentially, but I think it's just looking for identifying where those blind spots are, and then you can make a more risk informed decision. And that sort of brings me on to, I guess, how we can get there and how sort of Silverfort fits into this world and this machinery. And got the nice snowy graphics there for December, where I am at least, perhaps
December, sure.
not where you are, Rob. There, nice and warm where you are. But
No.
again, there's a few things to consider here. Obviously, we're focusing on Active Directory, quite rightly so, but clearly there is a cascading problem now, isn't it? AD is part of a bigger machinery of identity, data, applications, SaaS, and all that. And I think there is definitely this issue around leveraging something like Active Directory. Maybe he's a standard Joe Blogs user who hasn't logged in for 3 months. It's not a problem. He's only got read access to some SharePoint stuff. It's fine. But obviously that then lateral movement, privilege escalation. You then into service accounts. You then into NHI. Then suddenly there's API to API stuff there, which isn't being monitored. So suddenly it's just cascaded in the space of a few hours. And I guess looking at the likes of yourselves here, yes, pinpointing Active Directory, but that blast radius now is covering more systems. And I think it is that ability to look end to end, isn't it? And look at everything that's going on.
Yeah, I think so. Again, um, I used to think that maybe vertical solutions were the best for me, right? I would buy individual products and buy them, and
Mm.
that meant that I had a lot of vendors with discrete products, and then it was on me to kind of link them together through what we called glueware, right? Which meant I had to spin up a dev team to kind of help me build that glueware capability, keep it active, keep it current, keep it real. And what I've kind of decided, Simon, I don't have to practice security anymore, right? I get to talk about it. But I think the platform approach, especially in the identity space, just makes more sense. I kind of look at this as kind of the Silver Fort folks may cringe a little bit, but this is kind of like in my view, this is kind of like an ice cream sandwich, right? We got the cake on top, which is all the identities from AI agents, NHIs, third parties, you know, normal employees. And on the bottom, we have kind of the Active Directory worlds and directory worlds, the cloud spaces, the workspaces, the SaaS spaces. And in the middle is the ice cream, right? It's the good stuff, right? If people just wanted the cookies, they'd buy it. But they get the whole thing, right? They get the whole ice cream sandwich. And in that layer here where Silverfort lives, you really get the opportunity to inspect, analyze, provide that visibility across all the identities on the top and the places where they operate or where they work, where their workloads live on the bottom. And in the middle is that transparent capability that Silverfort provides, whether it's that universal MFA capability where you're linking with your own IDP, um, the authentication firewall, which makes great sense, NHI security, where you can do some discovery. I mean, it's really hard to discover a normal human user that is really an NHI. That is
Yeah.
hard to find because it's not the naming convention's wrong, right? Everything's wrong. I turned off an account one time at Dell. The dadgum person had aligned their user ID and password with a whole assembly line. So NHI is a big deal. Privilege access security, which is really the ability for Silverfort to actually discover the privileged identities as opposed to registering them. We couple that with the just-in-time capabilities. We've got you know, between ITDR and posture management, we now have the ability to see that across all the environments. So now you're getting that visibility of everything everywhere, right? And Access Intelligent is really kind of cool because it tells you what is Simon using. And you couple that with the identity graph below, that orange line below, that tells you across all your environments what I have access to. And so when you couple those two things together, it's what I have access to, which is really important if there's a compromise going around. And then what has Rob accessed, which is really powerful because then you begin to see what is I've been given access to and what am I really accessing. And the
Yeah.
difference is where you start reducing risk. And then you also validate, is that what Rob should have access to anyway? I get that he's accessing it, but does it really fit with what he does? He's in accounting. This is a product environment. So what's he doing there? Oh, it's because he was in product 2 years ago. Well, let's fix that, right? Let's not do this aggregation over years of access. I'm not accessing it, or I am, which is sometimes even worse, right? So then we've got the AI agent security where we can now see um, AI agents and do the attribution of ownership. And I think
Yeah.
when you look at both as I mentioned, vertical answers, every product is a vertical answer. But when you tie them together horizontally, you get a really powerful platform. And then you use that platform to enrich other environments, like send information to the SIM, or maybe a user behavior analytic platform, or maybe they share signals back to Silverfort that enriches what we know and what we can take action on. Now you get platforms talking to platforms. You start eliminating the number of vendors out there that you've got to do glueware to make work. And you start
Yeah,
going, these platforms need to operate together and they need to help us protect not just identity, but the rest of the environment too. And the identity is where things start. People log on to attack. That's statistically what they do. And
yeah,
so when you can get a platform that really works, tying the top and the bottom together, and you can share it across other security platforms to be enriched and to enrich, now you're fighting. Now you've got the right abilities to tackle not only the visibility problem, but to change the environment and to change the future, which is what's
yeah.
hard to do, right?
Yeah,
It's hard
yeah,
to do.
it is hard. I think this is really fascinating stuff. It's some real things I just jotted down there. One is absolutely it is that monitoring end to end. What's happening, but I think it's monitoring not just of the end users and the service accounts, NHI, but also the configuration as well. So it's the administration angle, which I think is important because all the systems in here, IDPs, AD, on-prem, it's complicated and misconfiguration happens. And I think that's another avenue where bad
Yeah.
guys get in here. And it's being able to look at that. I think the other one is, I think we do now need to have overlay technologies. I think, the days of having, as you say, AD specific stuff, and then you've got, okay, we've got an on-prem or a more IDP, we'll go and protect that in isolation. Then we'll go look at secrets in isolation. The bad guys move across all of them. They don't care. So I think
Yeah,
having it end to end is important.
they take advantage of the fact that we've got disparate systems
Yeah, yeah,
and that the visibility is not adequate enough, right?
yeah,
And I think it's hard to memorize all the configurations of cloud capabilities. Like that's hard to do. So for
mm,
every cloud, company you use, they have different configurations, right? And instead of doing that, what you do is you rely on a platform that touches those environments and you operate and you push the buttons and pull the levers to make the things work the way you want them to work within your security strategy. And then you can look across the environment. Oh, there's an AI problem. Hey, now there's an odd account problem with a privileged individual. And then there's an NHI problem. You begin to link complex attacks together through the same platform. And that is hard to do when you have 5 different vendors providing 11 different capabilities. Figure out how to solve that problem in a complex attack. It is very hard. It ends up getting put together in the SIM, and that's probably too slow.
yeah. And it's like, if it's in there as well, it's after the event, and that's the thing. Which if it's
Yes.
in if it's in the logs, it's been and gone. They've disappeared. The bad guys are gone.
And that's the brilliant part about Silverfort really being that transparent and visibility in action plane,
Yeah, yeah,
seeing all the identities on the top and the places where they might live and operate below. Like we're not leaving any of this out anymore. It's hard to go around us because you're either an identity or a place where an identity needs to go. And we see that. And that's very, very unique.
That's a nice touch, though. That's a nice place to sort of end there. You think about these different pillars of technologies, and you talk about PAM, and you've got IGA, and you've got AD, and other bits. And yes, you may even have point products on top of there, but it's the gaps between. I think if you do have this big sort of lump of concrete going across everything, it is hard. The bad guys they run out of spaces to hide. I think,
Yep.
which I think is a good sort of analogy to think about. I guess we're coming to the end. We've rattled through 53 minutes now, or we could probably go another 53 minutes quite easily, I think, on this topic. It's a fascinating area. And I think we've at least given a bit of a guide there to look at some of the key problems and obviously how at least to think about some of the solutions. But I guess now is the time to pull up any questions. But if there are any immediate, I guess quick question for you: what does sort of 2026 look like? We mentioned AI a little bit there. Is it all going to be about the year of AI, or there are more? I guess to me, there's more pragmatic things we can be doing there. You mentioned NHIs and
Well,
monitoring.
yeah. I think the shiny object is AI, but I think that I would hope that the pragmatic, sober identity and security teams that are focused on identity protection are going, look, we're not going to walk away from the base, right? We have to do the fundamentals really well. They're the tickets to entry. I think it's very hard for people who are not doing the base well to hop somewhere like, hey, we're going to do AI really well. We're going to do it in the cloud. We're going to do it really well. And you're like, I don't know how you can. You've not figured out what your privilege strategy is, or it's been poorly adopted. And you don't have any handle on what an NHI is and where it's being used. Um, you don't have any visibility across these ubiquitous environments, and you have no threat detection capability. Like you got to get some of these basics down because it actually bolsters your claim that you need more help. Otherwise, you are solving problems all over your IAM security environment, and there's no way to tell, like, what is your journey? I don't know. Like it's all over the map, right? Start with the base. Start with those pragmatic, practical things. And I will say, if you're acquiring a company and you can hop over some of the pragmatic stuff because you got a shot at doing something right really quickly, like AI, agent security, and visibility and attribution, do it. Don't avoid that. Like do it. But otherwise, build on top of a solid base and get some things done that matter.
Yeah, 100%. Great advice. I think, as always, do the basics. 80-20 rule. Any 80% of the attacks you can control and do something about it tomorrow. Going back to the day job and starting there. And I guess a couple of calls to action. I've read through the 5 ways to improve your AD hygiene. It's a good guide. Again, pragmatic advice there. You're looking at those top 5 areas where you can make an immediate difference. Absolutely, AI and the shiny attacks, the complex attacks are not going away, but they can be made more difficult to implement if you get the basics right. Hygiene, clean accounts, stale accounts, permissions, service account management, and of course, you guys do a demo in there, available on the website as well. I guess, Rob, we're coming to the end. Any sort of final words of wisdom you want to impart before we depart?
I think for us, especially for those who maybe don't have a gigantic security staff, the Identity Underground is a great group to join because
Yeah.
I've been doing it for about 15 months. Jessica Stone started this, and it is a fantastic place to learn. I've learned a ton being a part of that group. I would recommend joining. I think sometimes it's hard to know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And I think start pragmatically, do a little bit of research. And a lot of times you're better when you begin to pull people along and have them join the approach of improving the identity strategy at your company. If you bring a larger group of people, not a dozen, but 3 or 4 or 5 like-minded folks that can help sort of begin the journey together, start that momentum, kind of explain to people sort of what the problems are, what the risks are, and kind of where you want to go on the journey without all sorts of fancy technology conversations. And then you build that kind of North Star that says, here's where we're going to start and here's why. And here's where we are starting: fundamentals, basics. Here are the people, process things that we can start with because generally those are less costly. And here are some strategic purchases that we want to make or test. Maybe it's just a POC, but get going, try some things. And it will make a difference. And you'll
I
learn
think
some
that's
stuff
great.
along the way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, great advice. Start small, get those quick wins, build the business case, and build confidence in what you're doing. Rob, absolutely fascinating conversation as ever. Thank you for sharing your words of wisdom and advice. I think there's mountains of things we can learn from this, and I think Active Directory is a hugely important part of many organizations' infrastructure strategy, but it also has a role to play in enabling the business to do more. So, Rob, thank you for taking some time out and having a chat with me today. Super insightful and interesting as ever. Thank you to our audience for turning up and participating, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Simon.